He is the disciplined star, the man who wakes before dawn, the body built on routine, control, repetition. Mark Wahlberg is known as the example of structure in an industry built on chaos. But that image is only the surface. Behind it is a record that does not disappear. A childhood shaped by instability. A teenager pulled into violence before he understood its weight. He grew up in a crowded house in Boston. 9 children. Divorced parents. Limited supervision. He dropped out of school at 14. He spent time on the street instead of in classrooms. By his mid-teens, he was already known to local police. Then came the moment that still follows him. At 16, he was charged with violent assault. A man was permanently injured. Wahlberg served time. The record stayed. The story never fully left him. This is the part that doesn't fit the image. The price of becoming Mark Wahlberg was not just effort. It was distance from that past. It was years of trying to control the narrative. It was rebuilding a body, a career, and a reputation from a starting point most people don't recover from. So what happens when the past doesn't stay buried? What does discipline really mean when it's built on correction instead of choice? And when you see the man now, structured, controlled, precise, are you looking at strength, or are you looking at maintenance? If you respect the truth behind the image, leave a like as a tribute. Because this story doesn't start with success. It starts with damage. He was born in 1971, the youngest of 9. His father, a delivery driver. His mother, a bank clerk who later worked multiple jobs. The house was loud, crowded, and unstable in quiet ways. There wasn't enough attention to go around. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, parts of Boston were dealing with rising crime rates and economic pressure. Working-class neighborhoods absorbed it first. Families stretched. Schools struggled to hold students. Kids moved outside earlier and stayed there longer. Wahlberg was one of those kids. He has described being unsupervised for long stretches. The structure that exists in his life now did not exist then. There were no early mornings for discipline. There were late nights, street activity, and exposure to older influences. By 13, he was using drugs. Cocaine at an age when most kids are still in middle school. Substance use at that stage affects brain development, decision-making, impulse control, long-term planning. Those effects don't disappear quickly. He didn't finish school. He left at 14. That decision set a direction. Without education, options narrow. In working-class neighborhoods in the 1980s, the alternatives were limited. Manual labor, informal work, or street activity. Many chose what was immediate. He started committing small crimes. Theft, harassment, escalation followed. Police encounters became routine, not exceptional. Statistically, early exposure to crime and substance use increases the likelihood of repeat offenses. The pattern is well documented. Without intervention, most individuals in that environment don't exit quickly. At 16, the escalation reached its peak. He attacked 2 men in separate incidents. One was knocked unconscious. The other suffered permanent injury. Wahlberg was charged and convicted. He served time in a correctional facility. This is not a rumor or a vague story. It is documented. Time in detention at that age creates a different kind of structure. Controlled movement. Scheduled activity. Authority enforced physically and psychologically. For some, it becomes a turning point. For others, it deepens the pattern. Wahlberg has said it forced him to confront his actions. But confrontation doesn't erase consequence. The victim's injury remained. The record followed him into adulthood. After release, the environment did not change immediately. He returned to the same city, the same conditions, the same influences. Change required separation from that pattern, not just intention. This is where family influence re-entered. His older brother, Donnie Wahlberg, had already started building a music career. Through New Kids on the Block, Donnie had access to an industry that was distant from Mark's daily reality. The connection mattered. It provided proximity to a different path. Not a guarantee, but an option. Mark initially entered music as part of a group before forming Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch. This was not an instant transformation. It was a shift in environment. Studio time replaced street time. Structured schedules replaced idle hours. But the past didn't disappear during this transition. In the early 1990s, as his public image began forming, the earlier incidents resurfaced. Media coverage brought attention to his criminal record. The contrast was immediate: a rising entertainer with a documented history of violence. Public reaction was mixed. Some dismissed it as youthful behavior. Others did not. This tension between past and present became part of his identity. At the same time, the physical transformation began. Wahlberg built his body deliberately. Training, diet, repetition. The image that later defined him, disciplined, controlled, physically precise, was constructed during this period. Routine became central. Early wake-ups, multiple workouts, measured meals. This wasn't casual fitness. It was systematic. That system served multiple functions. It created a new identity. It provided structure that had been missing earlier, and it acted as control over the body, over time, over behavior. For individuals with unstable early environments, strict routines often replace external structure. It becomes self-imposed order, a way to prevent regression. By the early 1990s, Wahlberg had moved into modeling. Campaigns with Calvin Klein made him visible at a national level. The physical image became a commercial product. But even then, the past followed. Interviews referenced his criminal record. Public discussions questioned his transformation. The narrative wasn't clean. It was contested. He attempted to distance himself from earlier behavior. But distancing is not erasure. Records remain. Public memory holds fragments longer than expected. During this period, he also began exploring acting. The transition from music and modeling to film is not automatic. It requires skill development, industry access, and acceptance. Early roles were limited. Small parts, testing capability. Rejection was part of the process. Casting decisions depend on perception as much as ability. His past influenced that perception. Studios assess risk, financial and reputational. A controversial background adds uncertainty. He had to prove reliability. That meant showing up consistently, memorizing lines, maintaining physical condition, following direction, repetition again. The discipline that defines him now was built under pressure to be accepted. At the same time, he was dealing with internal adjustments. Leaving behind a street-based identity is not immediate. Behavioral patterns take time to change. Impulse control improves gradually. External structure helps, but internal shifts are slower. He has spoken about religion becoming part of his routine during this time. Daily prayer, reflection, structured belief. Another layer of control, another system. By the mid-1990s, small acting roles began to accumulate. Each role was a test, not just of performance, but of consistency. Could he maintain the schedule? Could he stay out of trouble? Could he function within the system? This phase is often compressed in public narratives. It's described as a transition. In reality, it was prolonged. Years of proving stability. Years of managing perception. Years of carrying a past that remained accessible to anyone willing to look. Statistically, individuals with early criminal records face long-term barriers in employment and social acceptance. The entertainment industry is not exempt. It amplifies visibility, which amplifies scrutiny. Wahlberg's path required sustained correction. He built routine. He maintained physical condition. He aligned with structured environments. He limited exposure to previous influences. This was not a single decision. It was repeated daily actions. By the time larger acting opportunities began to appear, the foundation had already been laid through years of controlled behavior. But the earlier years never disappeared. They remained as context, as contrast, as a baseline that made every later success more complex to interpret. Was this redemption? Or was it adaptation? That question followed him quietly as he moved forward. And it starts here, with a teenager in Boston, a record that doesn't fade, and a system of discipline built not from luxury, but from necessity. The shift into film did not happen overnight. It was gradual, controlled, and closely watched. By the mid-1990s, Mark Wahlberg was still carrying two identities at once. To the public, he was the former frontman of Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch. To the industry, he was unproven, with a past that could resurface at any moment. His early film roles were not glamorous. They were functional. Small parts designed to test whether he could operate inside a structured production environment. Film sets are rigid systems. Call times, marks, repetition, direction. There is no space for instability. He adapted. In 1997, he took a role in Boogie Nights. The part was physically demanding, emotionally exposed, and risky for someone trying to rebuild an image. The character was not heroic. It was flawed, insecure, dependent on validation. The performance changed perception. Directors began to see him as usable, not just marketable. That distinction matters. Marketability brings attention. Usability brings work. But the past did not disappear with that performance. Interviews continued to circle back. Journalists referenced the assault. Public memory stayed attached. This is the cost of visibility. The larger the platform, the harder it is to control narrative. He continued working. Roles in films like Three Kings and The Perfect Storm placed him in ensemble environments. Shared responsibility. Less pressure to carry the entire project. These roles allowed him to build consistency. Consistency is measurable in film. Showing up on time. Hitting marks. Delivering lines in multiple takes without variation. Maintaining physical continuity across shooting days. He did that repeatedly. By the early 2000s, he was no longer a risk in the same way. He was becoming a reliable component. Then came lead roles. In The Italian Job, he moved into a more central position. Action, coordination, physical performance. The body he had built over years became part of his professional function. Precision movement, controlled exertion, repeatable performance under direction. But physicality comes with maintenance. In his 30s, recovery is manageable. Muscles repair faster. Injuries resolve with rest and treatment. But the routine must be maintained daily. Weight training, cardio, diet control. He intensified that routine. Wake times before sunrise. Multiple workouts. Measured meals with fixed macronutrients. Sleep scheduled. Social activity limited. This is not a lifestyle most people sustain. It is restrictive by design. Statistically, long-term adherence to strict physical routines in the entertainment industry is low. Many actors cycle between preparation and decline depending on roles. Wahlberg did not cycle. He maintained. That consistency became part of his brand. Then came a shift toward more psychologically complex roles. In The Departed, directed by Martin Scorsese, Wahlberg played a character built on aggression and authority. The performance earned him an Academy Award nomination. Recognition at that level changes positioning. He was no longer transitioning. He was established. But success at that level introduces a different kind of pressure. Higher budgets, larger audiences, greater scrutiny. Mistakes become more visible. Around this time, he also moved into production. Projects like Entourage were loosely based on his experiences. This added another layer of responsibility: financial oversight, creative control, personnel management. The workload expanded. Film shoots require long days, often 12 to 16 hours. Production responsibilities extend beyond that. Meetings, revisions, negotiations. At the same time, he was building a family. Marriage, children, domestic routine layered on top of professional demands. The schedule became segmented. Early mornings for personal routine, daytime for work, evenings for family. This level of structuring is not optional. Without it, overlap creates conflict. But structure has limits. Fatigue accumulates. Sleep cycles compress. Recovery slows with age. By his late 30s and early 40s, the physical cost of maintaining peak condition increased. He did not reduce the routine. He adjusted around it. More precise nutrition, increased attention to recovery, ice baths, massage, monitored sleep. The body becomes a system that requires constant input to maintain output. At the same time, his film choices expanded into larger commercial projects. Transformers, Age of Extinction introduced him to a global franchise audience. These productions are physically demanding. Stunts, long shooting schedules, repetitive action sequences. Injury risk increases in these environments. Even minor injuries, joint strain, muscle tears, require management to prevent escalation. Filming does not stop easily. Delays cost millions. Actors often work through pain. He continued. Parallel to film, he invested in business ventures. Fitness brands, restaurant chains, production companies. Each requires oversight. Each adds cognitive load. Decision-making extends beyond creative work into financial and operational domains. This is where the earlier discipline translates directly. Structured thinking, scheduled time blocks, delegation, monitoring. But there is another layer that remained unresolved. Public perception of his past resurfaced periodically. In 2014, reports emerged that he had applied for a pardon related to his earlier conviction. The request brought the incident back into public discussion. Criticism followed. Some saw the request as an attempt to erase history. Others viewed it as part of a rehabilitation process. The response was divided. He eventually withdrew the request. This moment revealed a persistent issue. The past was not static. It could re-enter the present at any time, triggered by a single action. For someone whose identity is built on control, this creates tension. Control over routine does not equal control over narrative. At the same time, aging continued. By his mid-40s, the physical baseline begins to change. Testosterone levels decline gradually. Recovery time increases. Joint wear accumulates from years of training and filming. Maintaining the same physique requires more input for less output. He adjusted again. Earlier wake times. More precise scheduling. Reduced variability. The routine became tighter, not looser. This is a common response among individuals who rely on physical discipline. As the body resists, control increases. But there is a cost. Social flexibility decreases. Spontaneity reduces. Daily life becomes structured around maintenance rather than exploration. From the outside, it appears as discipline. From the inside, it can function as necessity. His public image leaned into this. Interviews highlighted his 4 a.m. wake-ups, his meal plans, his workouts. The narrative reinforced control, but the repetition itself is revealing. When a routine is described repeatedly, it is often because it must be defended, because deviation has consequences. At the same time, his film reception became uneven. Some projects succeeded commercially, others underperformed. Critical response varied. This is typical in long careers, but it changes internal pressure. Earlier in a career, failure is expected. Later, it is questioned. Each project becomes a metric. The industry tracks performance, box office numbers, audience retention, streaming metrics. Data replaces assumption. For an actor in his position, this creates continuous evaluation. He responded by increasing output. More films, more roles, more production involvement. Volume as a strategy to maintain presence. But increased volume reduces recovery time. Filming schedules overlap. Travel increases. Sleep becomes irregular despite structured attempts. The body absorbs this. By his late 40s and early 50s, the cumulative effect becomes measurable. Not always visible on screen, but present in routine adjustments. Longer warm-ups, more recovery sessions, increased attention to diet. He has spoken about waking in the early hours not just by choice, but because his body is conditioned to it. Habit becomes automatic over time. The system runs even when not required. This is the intersection of discipline and conditioning. What began as a corrective structure becomes a fixed pattern. At the same time, the gap between public image and internal reality can widen. Publicly, controlled, consistent, successful. Privately, continuous maintenance, management of fatigue, awareness of aging, awareness of past perception. This is the phase where the cost of earlier choices and sustained discipline becomes visible. Not as collapse, but as constant effort. The career is intact. The reputation is largely stabilized. But the system that holds it together requires ongoing input. Nothing runs on its own. And that leads to the present question forming quietly in the background. What happens when the system itself starts to strain? Now he is in his 50s. The body is still muscular. The schedule is still strict. The alarms still go off before sunrise. Mark Wahlberg still presents the same image. Control, discipline, repetition. But the mechanics underneath have changed.
A man in his 20s can train hard and recover overnight.
A man in his 50s trains hard and manages the damage over days. Muscle fibers repair slower. Joint cartilage does not regenerate at the same rate. Inflammation lingers longer in the system. This is not visible in a single photo. It is visible in routine. He wakes early, often before 4 a.m. Not because it is comfortable, but because it is required to maintain everything else. Training must happen before the rest of the day begins. There is less flexibility now. If the routine shifts, the system falls behind. His workouts are still intense, but they are more controlled. Fewer reckless movements. More precision. More focus on avoiding injury rather than pushing limits. The difference is subtle, but critical. Earlier in life, training builds. Now it preserves. Diet follows the same pattern. Measured protein intake. Timed meals. Hydration tracked. There is less margin for error. A poor week of diet in his 30s could be corrected quickly. In his 50s, correction takes longer and costs more energy. Sleep is managed carefully, but not always achieved fully. The body wakes early out of habit. Deep sleep cycles can shorten with age. Recovery becomes incomplete even with effort. This creates accumulation. Fatigue builds slowly. Not enough to stop activity, but enough to require constant management. He supplements recovery. Cold therapy, stretching, massage. These are not luxuries. They are maintenance tools. Without them, the system would degrade faster. There is also the issue of impact. Years of weight training, stunt work, and repetitive motion create wear patterns. Knees absorb load. Shoulders take strain from lifting and filming. Lower back stabilizes everything. These areas do not fail suddenly. They decline gradually. Stiffness in the morning. Reduced range of motion. Longer warm-ups before activity. These are indicators, not injuries. He adjusts around them. But the adjustments add time. A workout that once took 60 minutes now requires 90, including preparation and recovery. The schedule expands to maintain the same output. This is the hidden cost. From the outside, the image is unchanged. From the inside, the effort has increased. At the same time, his career has entered a different phase. He is no longer the new actor proving reliability. He is an established figure managing longevity. The roles reflect this. More authority figures. More controlled characters. Fewer physically extreme demands, but still enough to require preparation. Projects continue, but the reception varies. In recent years, films like Father Stu required physical transformation in a different direction. Weight gain, then loss. This process is more taxing at his age. Rapid body changes disrupt metabolism, strain joints, and require extended recovery. He completed it. But each transformation leaves residue. The body remembers fluctuations. Hormonal balance shifts. Energy levels adjust. Repeated cycles become harder. He has also spoken openly about his daily schedule in ways that reveal its rigidity. Time blocks assigned to prayer, meals, training, work, family. Minimal deviation. This is not just discipline. It is containment. When life is structured this tightly, it reduces unpredictability, but it also reduces flexibility. Any disruption, a late shoot, travel delay, illness, forces recalibration, and recalibration becomes harder with age. There is also the question of relevance. The entertainment industry moves quickly. New actors enter continuously. Audience preferences shift. Streaming platforms change consumption patterns. Metrics update in real time. For someone with decades in the industry, staying present requires constant output or strategic positioning. He has chosen both. Acting continues. Producing continues. Business ventures expand. Each one demands attention. Attention is a limited resource. Dividing it across multiple domains creates cognitive load. Decisions accumulate. Fatigue is not only physical, it is mental. This is rarely visible, but it is measurable in behavior. Shorter responses. More controlled interactions. Less spontaneous engagement. At the same time, his past still exists in public memory. It surfaces periodically. Interviews revisit it. Online discussions amplify it. The attempt to fully separate from it has never succeeded completely. This creates a persistent background pressure. No matter how structured the present becomes, the past remains accessible. For someone whose life is built on control, this is a variable that cannot be eliminated. And then there is family. He is a father, a husband. These roles require presence that cannot be scheduled with the same rigidity as workouts or film shoots. Children grow. Needs change. Time must be allocated not just in hours, but in attention. Balancing that with a system built on strict routine creates tension. Something has to adjust. Often, the adjustment comes in compression. Less personal downtime, tighter scheduling, reduced rest. Again, the system absorbs it. From the outside, it still looks stable. But stability here is active, not passive. It is maintained continuously. There are also signs of shifting perspective. In interviews, he speaks more about faith, about routine, about purpose beyond career metrics. This is common in later stages of long careers. The focus moves from expansion to interpretation. What does the work mean? What does the structure support? These questions emerge when the pace can no longer increase indefinitely. He has not stopped working. He has not stepped away. But the way he works has changed. More calculation, more selection, more awareness of cost. The body enforces this awareness. There is no negotiation with recovery time, no bypass for aging, no shortcut for accumulated wear. Even with resources, trainers, nutritionists, medical support, the baseline reality remains. The system requires more to produce the same. And this is where the image begins to strain. The public still sees the early mornings, the workouts, the discipline. It reads as strength, as control. But underneath, it is maintenance. A continuous effort to hold a position that becomes harder to hold each year. This is not collapse. It is persistence under increasing resistance. And that is what makes it difficult to watch. Not because he is failing, but because he is working harder to avoid it. The question at this stage is not whether he can continue. It is how long the system can sustain itself without reducing output. And what happens when reduction becomes unavoidable? Because eventually, every system reaches a point where maintenance exceeds capacity. When that happens, the routine changes. The image shifts. The pace slows. For someone defined by control, that transition is not simple. It requires letting go of the very structure that built everything. And that is the final tension in his story. A man who constructed his life through discipline now facing the limits of that discipline. A body that still performs, but at a higher cost. A career that continues, but under tighter constraints. And a past that never fully disappears, no matter how controlled the present becomes. This is not a sudden ending. It is a gradual narrowing. A daily calculation between effort and outcome. And the reality that even the most structured lives eventually meet something they cannot fully control. Time.